I got too injured in yoga. I hate just games. And I just am a very blunt, I love manual labor and doing stuff that just pushes my motivation. You don't just take the hits, you get stronger because of them. We have to be willing to be honest with ourselves. You're not going to find the core reason, and then you're going to make the same mistake again. You get to the core reason of failure. Grab the wrong handle, and things break.
Ready to lead with unshakable self-awareness, even when chaos hits? Our guest today, Becky Smoke, translates ancient Stoicism into powerful, actionable strategies for leaders from the NFL to the boardroom. She's here to show you how to master your toughest moments and choose the handle that truly holds. Thank you, Becky, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you so much for saying my name correctly. That means a lot. It's hard. No, to be fair, because no one else will know this, it is not spelled like smoke. It's spelled like schmooky. So, it's no one should get it correct. If you know.
But in your book, you have it how you pronounce it. You put smoke in there. And I think on your website too, you have
everywhere.
Right?
Everywhere it's in parentheses. But yeah.
So that means they haven't done any research if they pronounce it wrong. I would just get off the podcast. I'd just be like, we're done. This is out.
So when you
can't
get
even
it
pronounce
wrong.
it right. I read your book. So let's talk about the book. Choose the handle that holds. That's very evocative. Could you share how understanding conscious, what does that mean when it says two handles? Because when I read it in the beginning, I was like, choose the handle that holds. I was like, okay. And then I started reading about what happened in your life, as far as when COVID hit and all that.
Yeah.
So what is that? What are core values, and how did Stoicism help you in high pressure moments?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the title. It's why that title? What does it mean? So it's based on a Stoic quote by Epictetus. Which, to paraphrase, basically says, every situation in life has two handles, one by which it can be carried and one by which it cannot. And my argument within the book is that too often we grab the wrong handle and things break. And when we do that, we disengage from living life. And I think a lot of us aren't living. And I also, offer up the argument, which is that I don't think life is short. I think we make it short because we spend it passing time and not living. And the key to truly living life is grabbing the handle that holds. So in a situation of, you get in a fight with your significant other, instead of reverting to old habits or anger, yelling and just dropping your values and saying, I'll see you later, I'm going to go this way. It's staying true to your values, staying engaged in that difficult conversation, not losing your temper. That's the handle that holds. And when you do that, you don't have to deal with wasting time of all the shit that you would have to otherwise if you don't grab the right handle. And I think we just waste a ton of time. But that's my opinion.
I know your father's real stoic and you're not. You said that in the book. And I want to
get truly stoic. I was good. I do work hard. And my father, to be fair, he knows nothing about stoicism except for what is in my book. He
just was born that way.
He was. I always give the little spiel of what is stoicism in case I'm going to just, maybe everyone listening is an expert. If they are, I apologize. Use this time to go to the bathroom. Stoicism is misunderstood. A lot of people think of little s stoic, no emotions, Queen of England, stiff upper lip stoic. Stoicism, the philosophy, is it's just a completely opposite thing than the little s stoic, because stoicism as a philosophy is all about emotions. But as I like to say, I have emotions, but my emotions don't have me. And that's the important difference, is recognizing what is in your control and what isn't, taking everything that comes at you and turning it to your benefit, not just accepting life, right? But finding a way to turn the obstacle into an opportunity. That's Stoic philosophy. And it's tricky. It's a hard one. It forces you to look in the mirror, but it's something I love. And one thing I love most about it, and then I'll shut up for a second, is that I love that in the philosophy, it's very clearly stated that us humans, we're never going to become sages. The person they say is closest to that is Socrates. But the rest of us, we have no hope. There's no enlightenment. We're not trying to, it's not dangling get to here and then you can get higher. We're not trying to climb any ladder in the philosophy. It's just try to do better every single day and learn from the mistakes you make.
That's so good. Yeah. No, it's so true too. I want to get into...
If the sound of my barking dog is picking
No, I like it. I love it.
There is
You'll hear one in line.
Very evil Amazon driver probably driving down right now. So I was 13. So I was in 2000. I ended up being hospitalized for anorexia. and I was hospitalized for 6 weeks. And because of how they approached the treatment, when I emerged from the hospital and came home, I was not at all better. And instead, I continued with an eating disorder, and it, morphed into bulimia, and that continued for the next 20 plus years. And it's something that it didn't continue with me like actively wanting it to. It's 20 years of doing everything I could to get better, but never being able to. And then when COVID hit.
Do you think it was an addiction?
So this is a tricky thing. And this is where I'm okay putting my foot in my mouth and probably saying the wrong thing on a,
I like it.
on a clinical level of that, because I am not a doctor. It is very akin to an addiction. But what I think makes eating disorders, and there's a couple things even that makes it hard, is one is, let's talk about bulimia specifically, which is, when is the last time that you had a stomach flu? Can you remember the last time like you were sick and you like threw out because you're sick?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Okay.
Probably when I got drunk in Mexico or something.
So last weekend when you got, no, I'm just kidding. Oh.
Yeah, last weekend when I was super drunk.
So when you throw up, if you think about when you've been sick before with the stomach flu, you feel better, right? After you throw up. Do you remember that? Like initially you do feel better. If you have the actual stomach flu, like it comes back around and you're like, oh, I'm not better. But that's because there's like chemicals that are released when you throw up. So part of the tricky thing about bulimia is that it does give you a somewhat of a high, right? It does give you that relief on so many different levels. What also makes it hard, and I think a little different than other addictions, is you can be sober when it comes to alcohol and never drink again. But you can't do that with food.
Right.
So you have to always engage with your addiction, for the rest of your life. And like, if we're like, so that's what makes it tricky. And that's what I think makes it unique. There's similarities and differences within it. And for me, bulimia gave me this false sense of security.
Like how so?
It presented itself like the handle that holds. Because anytime I started to feel like, I never felt anxiety or like negative emotions.
So you would go throw up in a bathroom if you had a negative emotion?
No, so like it protected me from that in the sense that, let's say I was starting to get overwhelmed. And it, would kind of jump in and be like, hey, like, let's not think about how overwhelmed we are. Let's go engage with me, which was a binge. So I'd go, binge on food and then purge. And it allows you to kind of hyper focus, to distract, to distance yourself, to really escape from reality, all the other stuff you don't want to deal with. And then it just becomes a really, really alluring habit. And it doesn't make sense. It's such a gross kind of disorder that a lot of people are just like, I don't get it. Ew, why would you want to do that? I can't give you a very logical answer. I do agree. It's really nasty to make yourself throw up in bathrooms.
Yeah, but there's
the world.
People have so many weird.
But like that's just like, it's like logic isn't winning the argument there.
Yeah, 100%.
But as I make my argument book, as you read, what I discovered. So I spent 20 years trying to figure out like, why the hell am I doing this? Why can't I get better? It was writing this book and going back and reading all my journals and everything that I finally discovered how I became bulimic from anorexia. Like, how did that transfer happen? And it was because of an issue of them, the doctors and everyone treating for an outcome rather than engaging in the process and not choosing the right outcome.
Do you think it was mental mostly? Or do you think was it mental first then physical? Or do you think it was just mostly physical?
For me, my eating disorder started because this is going to go against, because I love advocating for curiosity, but I was curious. So I remember hearing about a friend or somebody that went to another school who was in the hospital for anorexia. I remember a very specific conversation with another friend, and we're talking about it, right? And like, remember, like in junior high, things like that was like big gossip. Like, oh my God, did you hear about this? And we asked each other the question, this other friend and I, like, do you think you could do that? And she's like, oh no, I couldn't. And I'm a very competitive person and a very curious person. And I was, at that time, it was like the end of 7th grade. And I remember
perfect time
consciously thinking, could I do that? I wonder if I could. And so I went about studying, because I'm also a big old nerd. So like, it was the early days of the internet, looking up calories of all the foods and doing my research and figuring out. And then so it started as an experiment of, could I do this? And The problem is that you soon it's a man, that's a slippery slope because it's
As
switched
a teenager too,
quickly.
yeah.
Yeah, to all of a sudden like, ooh, this gives me some control, sense of control. And, you're not really aware of the fact that you're not in control at all, right? Like it's a
Was it emotionally satisfying? Like, after you would be done, did you feel like, "Okay, I got that done with, that now I feel like."
No, I can tell you that what hits pretty soon after is complete self-hatred and shame, and, like, a renewed thing of, like, that was the last time, like, never gonna do that again. Like, I can't tell you how many,
Yeah.
like, last times I had, and, I got to the point when when I was, like, especially in college and stuff, I was binging and purging 7 times a day. It takes over your life, and you keep it secret. My friends, nobody knew. Nobody knew I was still doing that and so you get very good at living 2 different lives and very good at, like, kind of you know, it's a magician, right? Like, you kinda distract people. So, I'm very good at, making them focus on this over here while I do this over there.
And that gets me right into the strength pillar of your SAFE framework.
Mhm.
I wanna get into that a little bit because I know you have know yourself first, and it's kinda beyond introspection. What is the practical steps? And I wanna take it from there because there's a lot of people that are hurting with a lot of different things. It doesn't matter if you have a title of leader or not. How do you begin to know yourself, and how do you uncover these deeply false beliefs? Because there are beliefs and biases that are in us all,
Mhm.
and those are the things that create the addiction. How did you begin to really, like, fix yourself? Because obviously the doctors didn't.
No, and part what happened with the doctors is when I went to the hospital with the anorexia, like, their focus was and how they defined better was by the number on the scale. So they were just packing weight on me. And I had put in there and, like, when I was in the hospital, like, I kept a detailed journal, like, I mean, like, serial killer level, like, you'd read it and be like, "What is wrong with this person?" Like, I recorded conversations. I mean, I had nothing to do. There's no again, this is 2000. I had a journal, and I had all day, and so I wrote down everything I ate, everything, and I put some of that in the book as far as what they had me eating was ridiculous. It was not a normal or healthy amount of food, and they were just packing weight on me, and that's how they determined, like, I was better, was, "Oh, we got you up to this weight." And then afterwards, they sent me home because insurance stopped paying and I still had a couple more pounds to gain. They had me eating, upwards of 11 desserts a day. Like, that was on their thing, their healthy eating chart. I had the bubble sheet and I had to fill out. So I got trained into, like, eating this large amount of food
And then
and get
doing, like, yeah.
desserts are delicious. And so, of course, like, I got very used to that. And then we'd have weigh-ins. I wouldn't know when I was going to get weighed and I'd kind of find out. So I would start like a wrestler, right? Packing on weight so I can make the weigh-in so I could go run, go to cross country practice. And so that's how I kind of developed this binge eating mentality. And then the purging was a solution to the binging. I was like, okay, I don't want to keep gaining weight, so I can just get rid of it. As far as, how did I start getting better?
The strength pillar, how did you get
Yeah.
strength?
So how did I do it? Well, as I was going through life and as I had children, there's no ignoring the fact that I was not living with integrity. So strength is acting and standing with integrity. There are a few things I have done in my life that like make my, I don't know, skin just like it's a nasty feeling where you're like, not who I want to be, is setting my youngest down on the floor in my closet as a baby and her watching me. I don't know how many times she had to watch her mom purge, right? Or, just like it's all that consumed my thoughts. And then I'd feel so horrible about myself afterwards. I felt gross, all that. And so there's so many things that I didn't take my kids to or engage. I would tell you to your face, family is something I value, but I was not living it. And I knew it. And I could not get better. I had all these tools that was
So
called.
you loved your family, but that was
I
there,
don't.
and you can
It
hide it,
didn't.
and you could hide it.
Well, and I think that's where to this point of like, how do we, address our values? And if we're living with it, we have to be willing to be honest with ourselves of, you know, are we living what we're saying? I think most people can relate to working for a company where like the mission statement or values are on the wall and that's where they stay, right? They never get off the wall. And I was that was who I was being, and got pretty good at rationalizing it. And that's the thing is when we grab the wrong handle when it comes to integrity and our values, the next step is rationalization. Because we rationalize it and then we don't have to admit that we grabbed the wrong handle. But the moment you rationalize a decision that you know is not within your values, not within your integrity, you are trapped. You have to continue to grab that wrong handle each time. Because if you choose to grab the other handle, the right one, you have to admit to yourself that the other times you grab the wrong one. And so that's how we keep rationalizing the same decision, because it provides us the ability to not take accountability. We talk about values, we talk about integrity, but how do you know what your values are? And I call them your anchor values, the ones that, like, if you don't live them, you're never going to achieve success. And the best way to do that, the best way to know yourself and know what you stand for, is there's 2 exercises. One is to think about if somebody followed you around with a camera all day, video camera, what would they say, somebody watching that tape, your values are? Like, what are you doing throughout your day that support a value of family, a value of friendship, honesty? What are you doing? What are the actions? And a lot of us would have to be honest and say, like, I don't think it would look like I was honest today, or I value family. The other thing that you can do, and this is a fun one, and I say that very sarcastically, is writing your own obituary. If you write an obituary and you write it, you can do one of 2 ways. One, be absolutely honest with yourself, like in that real way that we don't often want to be. What would someone say you valued? The end of your life right now, what would they say you valued? And then read through it and decide what it is you want to change. The other one is write it how you want it to sound, and then read through it and be very honest about what is true and what isn't, and then go about changing it. Because I think we talk a lot about values, and it's just really hard to figure it out. And it's tempting to just look up, like, what are values? And see the ones that they say, the ones that we think other people want us to say.
Or we're dragging them from some religion or some from my grandparents, my parents, and then those aren't ours. Those were theirs. I see that all the time. So I want to get into endurance because, that's on your pillars. And one of the things that I noticed was, especially in today's society, no one has endurance. Everybody, like, when things get hard, they're like, fuck it, I'm done, I'm out. How did you have endurance? One, we'll talk about leaders' endurance, but how did you have endurance enough to say, fuck it, I'm going to heal myself? That's endurance. Like, that's a lot of freaking hard work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It was. So COVID hits and there's a lot of uncertainty. Going to continue to say things that everybody already knows, right? Point out the obvious. There was. And I'm married to a firefighter. He's on 2 different departments. And so he's on shift about 100 hours a week, out of the house on shift. And at the time, we had a daughter who had an undiagnosed lung issue. We didn't know what it was, but it kept sending her to the hospital. And I'm a type 1 diabetic. And at the time, we didn't know what that meant, right? There's so much we didn't know. And I just had this moment where I was like, shit, I have to be healthy. And it forced me. So, like, the one thing I could be certain about was my recovery. Like, that was in my control. And I had to finally admit that like, that's something that I could do. And so it was the start of COVID that I decided to be done with bulimia. And I discovered, and this was really hard to have to admit to myself, was that I didn't need the tools that I had been collecting all the way. Like, I kept looking for the quick fix, right?
Those become excuses, I think, a lot of times.
Yeah. And so, like, instead I realized, like, fuck, it's just on me. And all I had to do was realize that, like, because I know it's like dance with the devil, right? And the devil of bulimia, I knew very well. Like, I knew how shitty I knew it. I did not know life without it. And so I had to be willing to just step into that discomfort and that uncertainty and realize that, it's going to be okay. But it was throughout that I created that STOA process of figuring out, because you can white knuckle for only so long. And I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I got decent grips, but I can only grip onto something for so long before they fail. And so that was where I started creating that process of goal setting, strategic planning, and then debriefing to kind of reduce the burden of that white knuckling.
Do you feel like when it comes to endurance, and like taking day after day after day, because I think a lot of times for leaders, it's easier just to give yourself an excuse and quit and just move on to the next thing, because there's so many things that distract us. And so we never have that ability to where we're, one, vulnerable, and I'm going to get into that here in a second. But number 2, we can't look back, like you had said earlier, and like truly respect ourselves. It's like, how can you respect yourself if you're just quitting all the time on things?
Well, and that's where like I'm really big on defining the outcome that matters. And you have to know what success looks like. And we often chase the wrong outcome. And we want the outcome that's not in our control. We want that quick thing. So when we don't get it, we're like, oh, fuck it. Let's go do something else. And I'm guilty of that too sometimes, where my husband's always like, so I'll be like, oh, shit, I have to like to give this talk in a week. Like, I want to start doing some like abs. I was like, I want to have, and he's like, you realize that that's not how it works. Like, you can't just start, like, because then it'll be like 2 days beforehand. I was like, oh, I have to start doing some core work. And he's like, that's not how life works. You can't do it. It's not that quick, but we want it to be that quick, and to stick it out is harder. And that's where, you know, STOA stands for success, targets, obstacles as opportunities, and action steps. And if you take the time to, before you start something new, plan it out, figure out what does success look like. For me, with jujitsu, it is not to get a black belt at all. Like, that's not, I'm not, or any promotion of belt. Success for me is showing up and delighting and being humbled and learning something new. And just, like, I keep that as like in my control. And then you have your targets. What has to happen for you to achieve success? And then you plan out for those obstacles, right? What's going to cause you to quit? What has caused you in the past to quit? We know. We have to just take the time to admit it, right? Like, what our obstacles are, and then what opportunity does that present? And then the most important part, and what we often do not do with goal setting, are the action steps. We don't want to take the time to do the action steps, but you need them, right? The action steps would be that if you want to get out the door on time, it's like, well, I better set an alarm, that's a target, blah, blah, and then we're done. Well, the action step is setting the alarm, like actually doing it, and then you can check that off. In a team, it's deciding who's doing what, when are they doing it by, what's the check-in process, like those details matter. And then once you've done that, you debrief. And you debrief all the time. I debrief every day. I do this process when I go to Costco. And then I debrief when I drive home. I have yet to succeed at not by way more than I plan. Like, it's always a very tough debrief on the way home from Costco. But the important thing is if you quit, or if you find yourself wanting to quit, chances are you've already thought about what's going to happen, right? It's familiar. Like, oh, here we are. This is that moment when I want to quit. Or if you do quit, you still go back and debrief and be like, what happened? Why did I quit? But we have to.
It's so good. That's so good, Becky, because like I was in the military and we had after action reports, and that's we just debriefed. After every mission, we debriefed. And then you can also see like, oh shit, I should have done this, or oh, we could have done this, or maybe we should wait till 3 a.m., not 1 a.m.
Deep enough. I think and I did create this space. I love how fighter pilots debrief. I mean, they are just, it's amazing. I love the no rank, right? Like you go in there with the same purpose, which is to make sure you can be the best you can be. And the only way you can is if you get to like the core reason of failure. And too often we keep that superficial one. And if you don't take the time to keep asking questions, to keep digging, to go past when people want to be done, you're not going to find the core reason. And then you're going to make the same mistake again. It might look a little different, but it's going to be, because of that thing. And one of my favorite quick stories for that is I was taking a group of surgeons. So we had residents and faculty. They're here for a team building event, and we're going around, and gosh, it's a long time ago at this point, so none of them are around anymore. So that's why I can tell a story. And we were saying, I was asking surgeons. Surgeons love this question, which is, when was the last time you failed or made a mistake in surgery? Because they love to talk about their failures. Again, sarcasm. So I was going around just randomly asking people. And this one resident, he said, he goes, last Friday. I was like, okay, what happened last Friday? And he said, he was doing something and he cut a thread. He cut something too short. And I said, okay, well, why did you do that? And he goes, well, I had heard conflicting things from, one faculty has said this, another attending has said another thing. And he's just kind of brushing off. And in most cases, you'd be like, okay, that's what happened. You got told conflicting things. You made a mistake. I don't settle for that. I am the really annoying gadfly that just like keeps pushing, right? And so I was like, well, no, like tell me more. Kept pushing. And eventually he admitted that he did not feel confident enough or comfortable to speak up in the moment and to question. He didn't have that confidence. And, I'm like, okay, great, good job. Don't push him further. We move on because we're not doing full debriefs. And I just randomly select another person. It happens to be one of the attendings. And I said, when was the last time you failed? And he goes, last Friday. I said, what happened? He goes, well, he's like, I failed to create an environment where my resident felt comfortable to speak up. And I had no idea that this was the same thing, or that this attending was who the other one was talking about. I had no idea ahead of time. But in that moment, you saw it click for everybody of realizing like as leaders, it's on us to create an environment, and realizing that this was going to continue to happen. That resident may not make that same mistake again, but if he doesn't feel confident enough or comfortable to speak up, he's going to make more mistakes. And so just really, that's what I love about a good debrief, is taking the time to get to the core reason and everyone owning their part, the role they play.
Yeah, I love that. And you emphasize that Stoicism is emotional, not emotionless. And this goes right along with what you just said. Emotions are data. So, because a lot of times we think, oh, I got to be stoic. Even the word is like stoic, like withdrawn or I'm not going to
It is, yeah. Like the little S, it does mean that, yeah. But emotion.
What do you mean when you say emotions are data? How do you handle emotions? Whether it's you in the situation that you were facing with addiction and you're trying to figure it out, and then you're like, fuck, I really want to go do this. I need to do this. How do you handle the emotions? And then what do you mean when you say it's just data?
So if I think of emotions as data, it allows me to be a bit more removed from them and see just right off the bat. Like also, I'm like, okay, and you can take a little bit more. And I'm the daughter of a scientist, and that of a mom. My mom's a more holistic, energy worker. So both sides. And so I'm very comfy, just kind of right in that middle of things. And so I love data and I love emotions. Anger is a fantastic data point. So if somebody says something or does something and I feel that flash of anger, my job is to look at that, not shut it down, not be like, oh, emotions are bad, anger is bad. No, it's to be like, oh, okay, this is interesting. What just happened? Why did I get angry? Because there's different reasons. And it's not always the obvious one of like, get angry because that guy's being a total asshole. No, like, what about what he did, pissed me off? Was a boundary violated, right? Is he acting in a way that goes against my values? So I had that like flare up of like injustice, right? Like a real need to like make things. Yeah, I love that's to me is what trigger. If I see injustice, like I will get pissed off and I will want to do something about it. Or if I get that like an emotion of fear, like be able to get curious about that. Fear is when we are faced with fear, we want control, right? That's usually our default. When faced with fear, if I can see that as data and be like, okay, I know what this feels like, and get curious instead, curiosity leads to clarity. And that's what we want, is clarity. And so when we're able to just pause, and this is what I call the leadership reflex, which is, like the parent car arm when you're driving as a kid and your mom would put the arm out, right? And you can do it if you don't have kids, right? You have a case of wine, you still got to put the arm out there. Got to keep things safe. Is doing that. So that's my leadership reflex. And a lot of us, or not a lot of us, we've seen people do this, knee jerk. And whenever they have an obstacle come their way or things don't go as planned or they get angry or things just fall apart, they knee jerk. And as a leader, that means you're moving away from the people you're leading. That means you're moving away from the problem, and you usually try to do a quick Band-Aid solution to it. The car arm, the leadership reflex, instead is you're putting yourself between whatever's coming at you and the people you're leading. And you're not saying, hey, go backwards. You're not saying go forwards. You're just saying, let's pause right here, right? And gives you time. And you need to also apply that reflex, put the car arm in front of yourself too. So whenever you feel that emotion flare up, I just car arm the shit out of myself. And I'm like, all right, hold on. Before you respond or before you react, right? Take the time so you can respond and get curious, because emotions can tell us a lot of things. And that's
so good. I want to get into, because you just said something that I thought was really interesting. You said that injustice really gets you going. What do you think it is when because we all have that when we see that being acted out, but yet, whether it's my addiction or your addiction, we have so much injustice for us. Like we're the cruel taskmaster. We get pissed off when we see, but if you could go back and tell your 13-year-old self, you'd be like, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to you. it is the worst thing that ever happened to you. So there was this mass amounts of injustice you were giving yourself. How do you look at that? Because I know in your book you talk about having a leadership culture where vulnerability is valued. Like those surgeons, people don't want to get vulnerable. How do you genuinely embrace vulnerability, where you began to heal?
Yeah. And I want to say, actually, realize I don't think I've said this yet. One of my my soapboxes I'm always going to get on, and what the book is about is redefining leadership. So I want to make sure it's clear that when I'm talking about leadership or being a leader, I don't believe that it has anything to do with a job title. I think that's where we've gotten it wrong. Leadership is a lifestyle, not a job title.
Right.
Everybody is a leader, and you want to have a team of leaders, not a team with a leader. There's no such thing as too many cooks in the kitchen if we're looking at cooks as leaders. And so when I see people, though, talk about vulnerability in leadership, they are often talking about the person with the title, right, with authority and the power.
Yeah, exactly.
I think too often it's performative vulnerability, and it's because being vulnerable does not mean you share everything and anything. It does not mean you come in and you talk about your foot fungus, right? Like, no, that's not it. Vulnerability, if you are to share it, as a leader, needs to be something that the response from the person who hears it will have zero impact on how you feel about whatever it is you're sharing. You have to own your story before you share it. Otherwise, it's going to own you. And so that's a really key thing. Is just, I think we see it on social media a lot too. People just sharing a lot of stuff. So you're like
dumping all the time.
And it gives you that feeling of like, or it's that, I think the intention is good. It's like, oh, I want to, like, this happened to me too, but it can come across as like a one-upping, right? Or taken away from somebody. So the key is, first of all, understand the purpose.
Right.
What is the purpose of you sharing this? What is it that you're hoping to achieve? And take the time to think about how else might it be perceived. And it doesn't mean you don't share it, but it means you ought to call out the potential ways that it might be misunderstood. Because
it's so true. Yes. Yeah. Because it's so much bullshit, because I've had those where you're around a circle, you're doing trust falls, and it's all performative.
I know, I hate trust falls. I am not a fan of that. So for me, I was COVID hits. I'm going through my recovery. I'm not saying anything. And what's important to know is I have Stoic Edge Consulting is one business. I have my other business, which is Becky's Mindful Kitchen. And that's the one I've had for a long time. And I had to spend 7 years feeling like an absolute hypocrite to be running
That's what I was wondering. How do you have a mindful kitchen?
right?
You're bulimic with
Yeah,
food.
you do because you become very good at like hiding shit and hiding
Like
from
owning a
yourself.
liquor store.
I know. It
Being
makes total
alcoholic.
sense, right? And I was terrified that if somebody knew the secret of mine, right? Because no one knew. My husband knew that I was still struggling, but that was it. My parents didn't even know at the time that I was still struggling. And my husband only knew parts of it, right? And so COVID hits. I'm going through this recovery, and I'm starting to write more about mindfulness stuff on social media. And I did over 200 free online cooking classes. And so I was just gaining more of a following. And I was talking about vulnerability. And I felt so shitty every time I did, because I'm like, fuck, here I am telling people to be vulnerable, and I'm not. And I knew that this secret was what was keeping me from ever achieving purpose or the success that I want to, because it would limit me. I could only say so much. And so in this case, again, what is the intention? Why am I going to be vulnerable? Well, for me, it was to build credibility, because if I'm vulnerable and sharing this, then it's I'm going first, right? I need to never say this, but not that I'll show you show me yours, I'll show you mine type thing. But it is in the sense of, I'm going to lead. Here's my vulnerability. Now you know that when I'm talking about it, I'm not just like, bullshitting.
I went on your Facebook, which is awesome. You've got a ton of followers on your Facebook. And so I encourage everybody to hop on there. We'll have that in the show notes below. So what's it like Becky's Mindful Kitchen? There you are, being fake vulnerable. You started, what possessed you to start a mindful kitchen with an addiction, and then archery and survival skills? Like, what's going on here?
I'm an odd duck. So I love cooking, and I always had. I think that I'm hoping this actually does resonate with people, and they can understand what it is. That it's like that if you can't do, you teach, sort of thing. And in the logic, part of our brain does not does not match well with addiction. Right. And so I could know all the stuff and I love learning about it. I love teaching it. And that was just very separate. That was just a separate life for me. I was really living two parallel lives. And
So you weren't like making food, making a video, eating it all, and then puking, and then
no, the stuff I made was like very healthy. And like the stuff I'd binge on was just shit. Like,
right.
it was like,
It's just so funny how it's like that opposite.
because yeah, well, it made it worse because then like I'm then eating very unmindful foods too, and my whole goal was like create a place for connection and teach people like just how to find joy in cooking and not be like chained to a recipe and all that. Just go back to the basics. And but to the vulnerability part, the other important thing I was going to say was that I think we make the mistake of waiting until we can talk about something in the past tense before we share it because that still gives us some protection, right? We wait till we're at the summit. And if you wait till you're at the summit, the people down at the bottom who really need to hear your message, they can't hear you. And it's really hard to relate to somebody who's like, oh, I used to be like this. And you're like, well, cool. But like, I am like this. How did you get there? Like, how do I get there? And we forget, what it was like. And so I wanted to share that the story of my recovery while I was still in it, like in the beginning parts of it, and so 6 months in, I decided to write a Facebook post and share it. And because at that point, again, 6 months in, I felt solid at where I was at. So if people went on and said, you hypocrite, you suck, I'm never going to send my child to your summer camps, like I felt good about my story that of that I was sharing. And it would suck to hear that, but I could handle it. But I also knew that 6 months in, it's just like a drop in the bucket when it comes to recovery, right? I was not at all at the summit. And I wrote it and I just hit post. And I can tell you that all the fear I had of people seeing me as a hypocrite and coming at me, like that was just a story I was telling myself that was completely false. And it just built my credibility. And ever since then, like it empowered me to be very raw, very real on social media. And that's the, that connection and archery and stuff. Well, I love archery. I love recurve. I love hunting. Don't get to do it as much as I want to because, life. But, we just kept building on. So we have a whole timber escape here. I teach like bushcraft survival skills with my camps. I have 20 kids swinging hatchets and starting fires with knives and ferro rods.
That's awesome.
I teach 5-year-olds, how to use like a big chef knife because I think it's a mistake to let kids just use butter knives for too long. They need to know that knives are sharp and they can hurt. It's a fun thing. We have goats, chickens, all sorts of things out here.
Yeah, I want people to know this, as closing out. I'm going to ask one last question, Becky, but I think this is so interesting. If your name wasn't on the book and there wasn't an addiction with, a food addiction, I would think a guy wrote this book. If you're listening, because I have a lot of guys that listen to the book, we're talking about, you have chapters like elbows deep in a goat's vagina.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like seriously, like there's...
Nazi motherfucker.
Yes, yeah. It's like your jiu-jitsu and all these things. Where's the masculine side of thing come from? Because you're very feminine. Like, so where does the masculine side? Are you like a tomboy or?
I don't know. I hate just games. And I just am a very blunt, like, let's just get at it. And I'm
Because you got military in the book and athletes.
I know. So that's like, it is. I think a lot of it with the leadership stuff, I really did want to get put in a corner of like, oh, you're a woman, you need to just talk about women and leaders. Yeah. And like, you just do that. And I was like, no, because for me, I don't meditate. I don't split love, like give me an axe, and just let me be. And I sweat bad wood. That's a meditation, right? I just finished hauling by hand 15 tons of field boulders, and I make sure they're all size like 50 pounds on average or so, and I'll put them in the wheelbarrow, and I've been working on a project and doing all by hand. Like I love manual labor and doing stuff that just like pushes the body. My meditation.
Yeah,
that's how I like it. I don't do yoga. I got too injured in yoga. I'm probably the only person who gets injured in yoga. It's amazing.
You got injured in jiu-jitsu too.
I did. I got very lucky to still be walking. But that's where I've moved into NFL. That's a area that not all teens are open to women speaking on leadership, but a lot of them are. And I've just had so much fun bringing this different perspective in, with that idea of amor fati. Because I know you don't want to last question, but I want to end on, I can't not say something about my favorite Latin phrase. Um, it was just again, I every talk I give, I talk about I started like Latin, which everyone like loves, right? And then like I cover Stoicism, like the least sexy of philosophies, and I talk about death in almost all my talks too. So like I'm a real joyous, but they're fun, but it's just hard to like sell people on it. Like here's the deal, I'm going to talk about Latin, death, and Stoicism. Let's go. But there's this phrase and it's amor fati. And have you seen White Lotus, by the way? Have you watched that show? Okay.
I've watched all the episodes.
Okay, so the last episode of season 3 is titled Amor Fati. And I don't know if you remember, they do bring it up. But she missed the actress. It's not her fault. She just read the lines. Missed a key point of Amor Fati. So Amor Fati is Latin for love your fate, embrace your fate. And it's, it's not just like, oh, this is what it is. Like, okay, that's what I have. Well, it is what it is. No. Amor Fati, the way I teach it is, it's you don't just take the hits, you get stronger because of them. And it's finding a way to take everything that life throws at you, whatever's right in front of you, and turning it to your benefit. It's an active mindset. It's a concept of not acceptance, but like just freaking moving forward and taking it. And it's so fun. Here's why I'm so passionate about it, because what it does is it gives you permission to skip past all the like lamenting and whining and bitching and complaining. And it lets you just get into like, all right, let's go. And the reason I add the motherfucker at the end is because sometimes it's needed. And I can't tell you how many people told me to take that out of my book. They're like, I just don't think you should have that. And I just refuse.
No, I think it's amazing. Yeah.
It's what matters. And like the lax here.
Point.
It does. Well, here's the thing. It helps. For me, it helps. If you don't like motherfucker, then don't use it. But for me, it helps. I'll end on the fastest of stories, which is I was talking to the Vikings rookie class last year. I dropped the motherfucker within the first couple minutes of my presentation, but I think there's something, maybe because I'm Midwest, people think I'm just a nice girl when I start to talk, and they're not expecting a motherfucker out of my mouth. And so I'm starting the talk, kind of giving the intro, my thoughts on leadership, blah, blah, blah. And some of the players over lunchtime were eating. And this one player had just taken a bite when I dropped the motherfucker, and he starts choking. And like immediately you hear that like, and he was okay, but like it was, so you had a moment where he had to like cough it out, and it was just ended up becoming one of my favorite exchanges during a talk with someone of having to pause and be like, are you okay? And realizing like, fuck, everyone who now says like, swearing will kill you, like now a kid, like it is bad, and afterwards he came up and we had such a fun conversation. It's just those people who just, you're like, oh, you're a good person. And like you asked him that he was special. After they talk about amor fati, I talk about this other Stoic concept of memento mori, which is this Latin for remember you too shall die. The idea that like, you're mortal too. And I talk about death, how tomorrow is not promised. And I tell a story about a car accident that my husband was on and rescued someone from who ended up passed away that we knew. And anyway, so that's kind of the initial progression of the talk. I have this great exchange with this player, and 2 weeks later, he was killed in a car accident. And it was Kyrie Jackson. Heard the news. It was one of those really interesting things where you have such a strong memory with somebody, right? Like you don't know. And like, I doubt he realized at the time that like, that made such an impact on me. And I really enjoyed it so much. That's what sticks with me. And we forget that every moment, and I say it's about owning the moments that matter, is what I say in the subtitle of my book, but every moment matters. You have no idea what your last moment's going to be, and you have no idea when your last moment with somebody else is going to be, right? Like we don't know what happens next. And so as you go through your day, I just encourage everyone to realize and think about like you have a chance to be a memory for somebody, and you don't know what's going to stick and what doesn't. We all have such random memories, right? It's something that someone probably had no idea it meant anything to you. And I just can't handle the thought of giving up an opportunity to be a positive part of somebody's day. To do something that leaves them with that feeling of like, oh, not everyone's an asshole, right? Like that's the element of ending to it. Is just realize like, don't be the asshole. Just consider that. You just don't know what's going to happen next.
That's so good and such a great story. I appreciate you sharing that with our audience. Becky, I want to make sure everybody gets one. We're going to have the book. We're going to have all your links and stuff like that. But what are you doing now? What's going on? But what else do you have going on?
Well, if they're local to Iowa, you're welcome to come do your leadership retreats here or team building stuff. And then also, I'm going to be hitting up some different cities. I haven't decided where for like book tours. So if anybody has suggestions of good places to go, I love to hear it. And then the same with, always happy to come talk with people, but talk at your conference.
People, yeah,
I
right.
love you. I don't, because I want to talk with people, whether you like it or
I'm going to
not.
come to your conference and I'm going to motherfuck all of you.
I'm gonna it will be. I get very, very sad when I'm told I can't say motherfucker. So, but I just pretend like I'm talking to my 5-year-old campers, and so I let her. That's like the word I can use. And yeah. So I will. I promise. I know how to say words that are not swear words, but I'm much happier if I can't swear.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So we'll have that. Your consulting in the show notes too. Well, this has been amazing, super fun. Thank you, Becky, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.